Okay, everyone, we will go ahead and get started. Thank you so much for tuning in tonight for the Archives Program information session. So I'm just going to talk briefly about archives in general, and then go into more specifics about the MLIS degree at the School of Information Studies at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, and then talk even more specifically about the archives concentration within our MLIS program. I guess the first thing that I'll do is just introduce myself. So here's my bio page on SOAS's website. So I am SOAS's Archives Program Specialist. My name is Sean Hayes. As it says here, I've been with SOAS since 2014. So gosh, I guess almost 8 years now. And before that, I was an assistant archivist at the University of Wyoming's American Heritage Center in Laramie, Wyoming for 6 years. So that's where I really cut my teeth as an archivist and learned a lot of what I lecture and talk about in the different courses that I teach, which are also listed here. So Information Studies 650, which is our Intro to Archives course, which I'll talk about a little bit more. Our Archival Outreach course in Community Archives. I've also taught our 753 course, which is Preserving Information in Media as of late. So that is another course that I have been teaching and I hope to continue to teach. And my research interests, or I guess my interests in archives, really focus on social justice in archives, things like community archives and community participation in archives. And on kind of a related note, I'm interested in how archives influence identity construction, especially among people in underserved communities, which have typically not been well served by archives in the past. So that's me. And by the way, if you hear some crying or kind of shrieking in the background, I have a 4-year-old that needs a nap and a 3-year-old that has like a ton of kind of jittery energy in the room next to me. So hopefully there aren't too many interruptions, but if you do hear something, that's what's going on. So, okay, and then my colleague in the archives program is Dr. Force. He is an associate professor at UW-Milwaukee within SOAS. And the courses that he has taught in the past are 501. He hasn't taught 650 in a while, but he teaches 655 pretty regularly, our 750 course, which is arrangement inscription, pretty regularly, and advanced appraisal. And he's done a lot of publishing in the past, especially more recently. So for a lot of the foundational courses that you'll take within the archives concentration, Dr. Force or I will most likely be your instructor for those courses. So I just want to talk a little bit about us and who we are and sort of where we come from, just so you can have a name, or a face for a name. So, okay. So as I mentioned before, I'll talk just a little bit about archives for those of you that may not know a ton about archives already, which is perfectly understandable if you are just kind of starting your experience within the archives concentration, or you're considering pursuing the archives concentration. So what are archives? Archives are essentially institutions that focus on providing access to records. And, you know, that's sort of the long and short of it. Archives essentially serve to provide access to those records. And there are a whole host of issues that go into providing access to records, but that's sort of the long and short of the reason why probably 99% of archives out there exist. You know, of course, there are private archives, there are archives that may be restricted, and so they're less focused on access and maybe more focused just on preservation until the records are meant to be accessible. But again, 99% of the time, archives are focused on providing access to records. And what's interesting to me about archives is a pretty broad field. So people may have a perspective of archives that is just kind of people in a room shuffling around papers, and they may not be aware of the different fields or sort of areas of study that archives are involved with. So technology, a lot of records created today are digital records, and so archives have to have some way to preserve those records and provide access to those records. So that involves a familiarity with databases and different tools and strategies to preserve those records and to provide access to those records. So there's definitely a technology component. And then there's also another aspect of archives that is more focused on the humanities and things like social justice that I mentioned before. So these days, a lot of archives are focused on how archives can be more representative of the communities that they serve, and how they can correct the absence of certain communities within archives that has taken place in the past. And sort of the idea is that through representation in archives, through the representation in history, a community is more able to say, we exist, we matter, we should be viewed as equals in society and not people that have been kind of marginalized and forgotten. And so that is certainly a big force within archives, and it's really influenced a lot of how archives have developed, probably over the last 10 or so years, but even going back to the 70s. And it's sort of the other side of the coin. So you kind of have the kind of technical side of archives, and then you have this side of archives that is focused on things like philosophy and social justice, thinking about why archives collect what they do and how that influences things like social memory. And you can really go into a lot of different directions when you begin to think about those issues. And it's really this combination of sort of the hard and the soft within archives that I think makes it such an interesting profession, and a profession that I have enjoyed practicing and teaching about for, I guess, the last 14 years now. Wow, that's a long time. So, and then, on top of going to school for my archives degree before that. So yeah, it's sort of, at least to me, endlessly fascinating, and a really nuanced and interesting profession and field to get into. So yeah, just to kind of provide a little bit of an overview of archives. There might be people that might disagree with some of what I just said, but that's sort of my perspective on archives, having been in the game for I guess quite a while now. So okay, so having talked a little bit about archives, I'll shift gears a little bit and talk about the MLIS within the School of Information Studies, and then I'll talk in greater detail about the archives concentration and how that fits in with the MLIS. And then I'll talk about some of the keys for success that I have seen students take advantage of or not take advantage of, throughout the years as I have taught and advised students. And then we'll kind of wrap up from there. So yes, the MLIS program. So that's our Masters of Library and Information Science. A pretty well-regarded MLIS program. So we're really proud of how we stack up against other MLIS programs out there. And then, there are some specializations and concentrations, which I won't get into too much, except for the archives concentration. If you're interested in learning more about those, I'd really encourage you to kind of poke around SOAS's MLIS website. What I am going to focus on more is this curriculum here, just to kind of go over it really quickly. So the minimum requirement for your MLIS is 36 graduate credits or 30 if you already have a master's degree or a doctorate. So if that's the case, then you don't have to take as many credit hours out of recognition of your previous education. So here are the required courses for the MLIS program. So 501, 511, 571, and 799, which is the culminating experience. You have to get a B or better in each of the required courses. So you don't necessarily have to get a B in your other courses that you take that aren't required. But if you want to graduate, then you have to get a B or better than these 4 courses here as a part of your graduation requirements. So that's just a little bit about the MLIS. I'll switch gears and talk about the archives concentration and sort of talk about how that fits in with the MLIS as a whole. So here's the webpage for the archives concentration. Again, I would encourage you to kind of poke around it and take a look on your own. Because I won't talk about everything on the page, I'll just kind of touch on the about in the curriculum. There's a way that you can request information here if you'd like. So that's certainly an option, an advertisement for the info session, which you're in right now. So I'll go ahead and click on the curriculum and we will take a look at how the archives concentration fits within the MLIS as a whole. So first of all, if you want to take the archives concentration, you have to fill out this declaration of intent form. It's a very short form that just basically says, I want to pursue the archives MLIS. And then that way you can make sure that when you graduate, it says on your transcript, the student pursued the archives MLIS. Even if you take all the courses that you need, if you don't fill out this form, then it won't be represented on your transcript, and that may cause you some issues when you go to find employment as an archivist in the future. So definitely something to be avoided. Okay, so we will look at the program requirements. So as this is here, you have to take 15 credits of coursework in archives within your overall MLIS program. So I talked about before about how you had to take either 36 or in some cases 30 credit hours. Of those 36 or 30 credit hours, 15 of those credit hours need to be archives electives. And it's a little bit more structured than that, which I'll go into in just a bit, but kind of the long and short of it is that 15 of your MLIS credit hours must be archives. Can you take more than 15 credit hours of archives courses if you want? Sure, but a minimum of 15 of your MLIS credit hours need to be from the list of archives courses. And I'll talk about those in just a minute here. Okay, so next we'll look at some of the required courses and electives. And for that, we'll bounce over to the UWM Graduate School catalog. And then scroll down here. We won't talk about the admission application or the application requirements too much. If you have any questions about that, feel free to contact the school. So this just talks a little bit about the required courses within the MLS, the Be or Better stuff that I just talked about, and so on. And then the archives concentration more specifically. So there is one course within the archives program that every archive student is required to take, and that is our Information Studies 650 Intro to Archives course. And similar to the other required courses for the MLIS program as a whole, in order to get the archives concentration, you have to receive a B or better in Intro to Archives in order to receive the transcript designation. So just something to keep in mind. If you do take 650 in the future, that if you want to continue along the archives concentration path, you need to get at least a B or better. And as you can guess from the title of this course, Introduction to Modern Archives Administration, it is a course that provides an overview of a lot of the different processes that archives engage in. So it starts pretty broadly looking at what is an archive, what is a record, and then it focuses on different activities that archives are involved with, such as appraising records to see if they should be brought into an archive, arranging and describing records to make them more accessible, providing access to records online, preserving records. So there's a week of preservation and a week of digital preservation, looking at reference or research services. So how archives interact with researchers to help them find the information that they want. And then the course also looks at legal and ethical issues that archives have to navigate. So things like copyright, things like privacy. It looks at personal archives, which are archives created by individuals and not organizations. And then it wraps up with just a couple of discussions about social justice in archives and community archives. So again, it's just a broad overview of a lot of the different issues and processes that archives have to engage in. Okay, and so in addition to Information Studies 650, you also have to take a minimum of 6 credits of our what we call our foundation courses. So these are 750, 752, 753, and 855. And you can choose which of these 2 courses you would like to take. So we've designed the concentration to be a nice mix of structure, but also a structure that allows you some freedom to kind of pursue your interests and take the classes that you want to take. And a lot of the classes that you'll take, especially in this foundational kind of subset, will be deeper dives on issues that you will talk about in Information Studies 650. So we have a week about arrangement and description in 650, and then you can take a whole semester-long course just about that one process that archives engage in, and that is 750. The same for archival outreach, which I also touch on in 650. If you are interested in preservation, then we have our 753 course. If you're interested in appraisal, we have 855, and so on. But you need to take at least 2 of these courses. Now you can take more if you'd like, but you need to take at least 2 of them. You know, you can certainly take all 4 if that is what you are interested in doing. And then we also have elective courses, and you can count a maximum of 6 credits of these elective courses towards your concentration. So these are things that are maybe less related to kind of foundational archiving, but complement or provide a background in a lot of the skills that archivists might be expected to have, or situations that archives would have to deal with in the future. So there's a course related to information and records management. There's a course related to digital libraries, so looking at things like online access and how that might be structured. There's a course about metadata. Things that just kind of complement knowledge that you would gain during 650 and during your foundational courses as well. So again, a maximum of 6 credit hours can come from this sort of pocket of courses. And one that I'll talk a little bit later, which is not a required course, but an important course that we recommend highly nonetheless, which I think is what this little footnote says. Yep, option but highly recommended for those without experience working in an archival collection is our Information Studies 759 course, which is the field work in archives and manuscripts. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a second. So yeah, it used to be that you could just take Information Studies 650 and just kind of choose what other courses you wanted to take in order to reach your 15 credit hours. Dr. Force and I decided that it would be better if we require students to take foundational courses just to make sure that when they do go and apply for positions, you know, they have some kind of background in outreach, that they have some kind of background in analog and digital preservation. So really, it was something that we decided to do in order to make sure that our students graduate and are able to be more competitive on the job market. So that was kind of the impetus for our choice to make the courses that students had to take for the archives concentration a little more structured. But again, you do have some flexibility. So you can choose, which 2 of these courses you want to take and so on. So I also want to emphasize that you can take your entire MLIS and you can complete your archives MLIS completely online or completely on site. It's really up to you. A lot of students these days complete the degree either completely online or mostly online with some on-site courses sort of sprinkled in there. It's sort of few and far between the student that does their whole MLIS or even their whole archives concentration completely on site. Again, that provides a lot of flexibility for you as far as when you work on your assignments, when you interact with course material, where you do it from. So you're not required to be in Milwaukee. It's a lovely city as it is. You can still complete the whole degree online and have the same degree as everyone else that has completed the MLS. So again, just this idea of flexibility in allowing you to sort of take courses in the format that you prefer. We don't offer every course online and on-site every semester. That's kind of beyond the capabilities of Dr. Force and I. But we do try and keep track in making sure that if we haven't offered a course online in a while, then we try and have a nice mixture and a nice rotation, and then we're offering courses in both formats as regularly as we can. So we do sort of have a plan in place as far as, okay, in the spring we'll offer community archives online, and then in the fall we'll offer it on site, and just sort of switch formats pretty regularly so that everyone can take the courses that they want before they graduate. The last thing that we want you to have to do is to take a course because you need the credits to graduate, but it's not really the course that you wanted to take. So we do try and have a pretty regular rotation as far as what we offer. Okay, so that's just a little bit about the MLIS and the archives concentration and sort of how that fits in within the MLIS. So what I will talk about for the next few minutes here before I answer any questions that you might have, and then we'll go ahead and call it a night, is what I like to call the keys to success for students that are pursuing the archives concentration. And these keys to success really focus on professional development, professional participation, and networking. And these are really 3 related things that if you engage in them, especially as a student, it's really going to benefit you when you graduate and you go to look for a position as a professional archivist. So the first one that I'll talk about is professional development. And there are a few ways that students can gain professional development as a student within SOAS. So the big one is something that I touched on earlier, our Information Studies 759 course, which is essentially when a student goes and does a field work or an internship at a archives for a semester. So typically students complete 150 hours of field work. For every credit hour that you want to receive, you need to complete 50 hours of field work. So typically students just do the 3 credit hours for 150 hours. Sometimes we have students that might do, 50 hours one semester and 100 hours the next semester and sort of break it up a little bit. But this is a really important course for students to do and an important experience for students to engage in. Again, especially if you are coming into the program with little or no experience as a professional archivist. So if you graduate and you don't have some sort of experience on your resume, then it's going to be something that has a likelihood of setting you back on the employment market. And so it just really is to demonstrate that you have this professional experience, that you have this professional development, and that you have experience working with the different issues that archives have to navigate. Another great thing about fieldwork is it's a great way to network. So as you are working with the archivists at your institution, you're showing them, hey, I'm responsible, you can count on me, I know what I'm doing. And maybe that person is going to be hiring in the next, few months, or maybe they're hiring after you graduate, or maybe someone that they know is hiring and they can provide a good recommendation for you. So the archives profession is pretty small, and a lot of people know a lot of people. And if you are able to do some networking just by working with people, and again showing them that you are a mature and competent archivist, then that can really be beneficial for you when you are on the job market. So it's all about gathering experience. And I want to backtrack a little bit and talk about experiential learning, which is something that both Dr. Force and I have incorporated into the different courses that we teach within SOAS. So for example, within Dr. Force's arrangement and description in archives, he has students learn how to work with a type of software called ArchiveSpace. And I've heard time and time again, learning how to use ArchiveSpace in Dr. Force's class was so helpful for me. And when I went and did my field work, or when I went on the job market, knowing how to do ArchiveSpace was a great help. In my archival outreach course, I have students use a tool to create an exhibit. And so again, that's something where you can say when you go to interview for a job, yes, I've already created an exhibit. Here's a link to my exhibit. And it's just a great way to learn how to do things that archives will be expected to do, and sort of demonstrate your competence and experience doing those things. Preserving information media, I have students work with different digital preservation tools and sort of describe the process of doing that. So we really have incorporated a lot of experiential learning within our courses, again, with the idea of graduating students that are as successful as possible on the job market. Okay, so other great ways to develop as a professional are by going to conferences and workshops. And that's a great way to learn more about specific aspects of archiving. So when you go to a conference, you can kind of pick and choose which sessions you want to attend. If you're interested in preservation, then you can go to sessions focused on preservation. If you're interested in outreach or reference, then you can go to sessions related to that. And workshops are great too. So there are digital preservation workshops. The Society of American Archivists offers a lot of really great workshops. Different regional and local archival organizations will sometimes offer them as well. So these are great ways to develop as a professional. And these conferences and workshops are a great way to network as well. Between sessions, you can run into people and talk to people. They always have, mixers at these different conferences. So that's a great way to meet and talk to people. You can do a poster session for a conference, and people will come and ask you about your poster. So workshops and conferences are great because they not only do you learn about archives and learn more about being an archivist, but again, there's this networking component, which is so important. So workshops and conferences can be expensive to attend, and we recognize that, and that's why each year the Archives program offers scholarships for students that want to go to conferences or want to go to workshops. So Usually we have 2 or 3 $250 scholarships and then one $500 scholarship. And that's for things like lodging or food or travel. And it's just our way to demonstrate that we recognize that going to these workshops and conferences is really valuable for students. And we want to make that as possible as we can. And so that's sort of how we try and support our students' professional development. Another thing that I'll mention is a program that we have called Alternative Summer Break. And that's where students spend a couple of weeks working in an archive over the summer. It's not something that you receive credit for, but it is a great way, again, to just kind of get your name out there and do some networking and make archivists aware of sort of who you are and what you can offer. Sometimes we have students do alternative summer break and then they'll do field work at that site. And so the two experiences kind of connect with each other. That's sort of a great way to get your feet wet a little bit and think, okay, well, do I want to work here a whole semester, or do I want to find somewhere else, or whatever your thought process is. So yeah, this is just kind of another way to get a little bit of experience and do some networking as well. Another way that students can develop into a competitive force on the job market is by getting involved in archival organizations. So I mentioned the Society of American Archivists. They are the main archival organization for the United States, and the SAA has a lot of different sections and roundtables focused on different issues that archives deal with. So there's a digital records section, there is a reference section, and then there are roundtables which tend to be a little bit more specific. So there are roundtables on LGBTQ plus archives and archivists from that community. There are roundtables related to tribal archives and ones that kind of focus more on maybe more specific aspects of archiving. And being involved in these sections and roundtables is a great way to learn more about archiving, to get involved with the archival profession, and to do some networking. As you work with people and sort of communicate with people in your section or roundtable, that can really demonstrate to them that you are really interested in being an archivist, you're really interested in a specific aspect of archiving, and it can show them sort of your background and expertise in a different area of archiving, and that can be really valuable when it comes time to go on the job market as well. So that is another sort of key to success, is being involved in these archival organizations. So the SAA is the national sort of archival organization. There are regional ones as well. So for instance, here in the Midwest, we have the Midwest Archives Conference. There's the Society of Southwest Archivists, the Society of New England Archivists, the Society of Rocky Mountain Archivists, which is located in the Rocky Mountain region. So Utah, Wyoming, Colorado, and sort of the national landscape is split into these different regional archival organizations, each of which have their own sections and roundtables and conferences as well. And you can also get involved with being an officer within these different organizations as well. So I've served on the local arrangement committee for different organizations before. I've been a president. So again, it's just a great way to kind of show a little ambition and get to meet different people. And they might be in a position to sort of vouch for your experience and expertise one day in the future. So those are just some of the ways where you can really touch on those three key things of professional development, professional involvement, and networking. And I know that it takes time, it might take money, but I see it as an investment. Doing these things can make you more competitive on the job market, and really that's sort of the name of the game. And again, we try and support your involvement in these things as much as possible. One other way that we provide support for these activities is by making you as a student aware of them. So throughout the semester, I send out archives program news emails, which say, this scholarship is available to this conference, or this conference is going on here, and things like that. So we really try and help students stay on top of what opportunities are out there, again, so that they are in the best position to take advantage of them. Okay, so yeah, that's just a little bit about myself and Dr. Force, a little bit about archives in general, some details about the MLIS and the archives concentration within the MLIS, and what I see as the keys to student success. Yeah, at this point, if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them. You can either ask them in the chat, or if you just want to turn on your microphone, I'm more than happy to answer any questions. Or yeah, so if you have any questions, feel free to let me know.
Hey, Sean, so for the foundation courses, it sounds like you just have to take 650 to take any of those. There's no other prerequisite. Is that correct? Or do they need to be taken in order, any of those?
Right, good question. So once you take 650, that opens the door for all the foundational courses. Some of them you can actually take at the same time that you take 650. So 650 is sort of a co-requisite for some of the foundational courses. I don't believe that's the case with 855, but with the 700 level courses, 650 can even be a co-requisite. And so that's just so that you have that sort of basic knowledge of a topic, again, before you dive into greater detail about some of the issues that we talk about in 650. And thanks for asking.
For the summer alternative summer program and the fieldwork course, is it on the student to find those opportunities, or does the school help with that?
Yeah, great question. So when you're interested in doing field work, you fill out an application that has sort of basic information about yourself. And then there's a section where you can either say, I know that I want to go into this archive, or I have no idea where I want to go, and I really want help to figure out, which might be the best archive for me. So if you have an archive in mind, then that's certainly one that we can focus on, at least initially. But if you need some help, then I'm certainly more than happy to help you think of an archive that you might want to go to, and then approach that archive and see what we can get going. It's not a guarantee if we ask an archive to host a student that they'll want to, or that they'll be able to. Sometimes they just might not have enough staff to supervise someone, or they might just be too busy. But I have a pretty good success rate as far as getting students where they want to go. And over the years, administering field work and reading student and supervisor evaluations, I sort of have a good sense of what might be a good fieldwork placement and what might not be a good fieldwork placement. I really encourage students, if they are going to do field work, to do a meaningful field work. So not just scanning records for 150 hours in a semester, but actually doing things like appraisal and preservation and outreach, and really, getting their hands dirty and doing things that are going to help them develop their archival skills. So if I see a field work saying, oh yeah, we'd love to have a student kind of come and scan documents their entire field work, then I'm gonna be like, okay, well, that's not really a good use of a student's time. So there is a vetting process kind of on my end where I think to myself, okay, is a student really going to get something out of this experience, or are they just kind of go in there and be a drone for 150 hours and walk away not really having learned or experienced anything that's going to be valuable for them? So yeah, I really like working with students to help them think about where they might want to go. And then in addition to that, communicating with the archive and just making sure that the student is going to be going into a good and useful experience. So thank you for asking. That's a good question.
Yeah, thanks.
Hi. So I wondered about choosing the courses after the introduction. Do you recommend having like some sort of advising session prior to making those calls or not?
Yeah, we really like it when students talk to advisors. So typically, if you're asking for advice on archives courses, myself or Dr. Forrest will be the ones that sort of talk to you about what courses you might want to take, or even what courses you need to take to graduate. So yeah, we definitely encourage you to kind of reach out and say, here's what I'm interested in doing in the archival field. And, what courses do you think would be best for me to be able to do that? So, there are some courses that are just sort of broadly more important or more applicable for the job market. So things like preserving information media, digital preservation is such a huge issue for archivists. That's one that we really recommend students take, just so they have that kind of background in preservation. I think outreach is extremely important. So that's a really good sort of background to have. Arrangement and description is something that most archivists are going to be involved with. So that's certainly a useful course as well. Advanced appraisal, appraisal is an extremely important aspect of archiving. So that's a very sort of utilitarian course. When you get to the elective courses, they're a little bit more specific. So digital libraries, you may not do any work with providing online access, but if that's something that you want to get into, then you really should think about taking digital libraries. If you want to focus more on the records management side, then it would really behoove you to take 655 and so on. So yeah, a lot of it just kind of depends on what you want to do, and then having a conversation with myself or Dr. Force about how that kind of fits in with your broader MLIS and within your archives concentration. And then kind of going on from there. But yeah, it's always good to have a conversation just to make sure that you're on the right track.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Okay, are there any other questions? All right, well, if you do think of anything, my email address is hayes29@uwm.edu. So definitely feel free to shoot me an email, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have. So thank you so much again for joining me. Thank you so much for those of you that are listening to this sort of after the fact. And I hope that I see you in an archives course in the future. I know some of you I'm seeing right now, but I hope I see you in more courses in the future. And I hope those of you that are considering the concentration, I hope I see you in an archives class as well. So thank you, and have a great night.
Thanks, John.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.